What's good? It's Woog. Boy, we have a banger this time. Artur Beterbiev, 18 wins and 0 losses, is defending his WBC, IBF, and WBO light heavyweight titles against Anthony Yarde, 23 wins and 2 losses. Artur Beterbiev is one of the best, I would say one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Whether you have him in your top 10 pound-for-pound pretty much depends on whether you are kind of penalizing him for being in the same division as Dmitry Bivol, who just beat Canelo Alvarez and Gilberto, Zurdo, Ramirez, and Beterbiev not yet fighting Dmitry Bivol. And that is one of the biggest, or if not biggest, at least best dream matches in all of boxing. That would be a battle for undisputed between Artur Beterbiev, who holds 3 of the belts, and then Dmitry Bivol, who's been a longtime WBA champion. And if you look at this matchup between Beterbiev and Anthony Yarde, all it takes is one look at their knockout ratios or knockout percentages. You've got Artur Beterbiev undefeated, and in all of his 18 wins, he has scored a knockout or TKO. And then Anthony Yarde, 23-2, out of his 23 wins, 22 have come via knockout. So the idea here is something's got to give, which was also the case in Artur Beterbiev's last fight, which was a title unification against hard-hitting and much younger Joe Smith Jr. The idea was something's got to give here. And another thing that makes this fight pretty interesting is that Artur Beterbiev, as good as he is, he just turned 38 years old today, January 21st. So 1, happy birthday, Artur Beterbiev. But 2, I mean, the writing's on the wall here. This is one of those cases where, because he turned pro kind of late, it's almost a little bit unfortunate that we're not getting more Artur Beterbiev. Like, he is near the end, you would think, of his professional career, or at least of his peak abilities. But he is such a must-see force in boxing. I consider him to be one of the most destructive forces in boxing. It's just a shame that we're not going to get a longer professional career, and that essentially the party's already almost over for prime Artur Beterbiev. So yeah, the boxing world is really hoping that if Beterbiev gets past Anthony Yarde, that Beterbiev versus Bivol is made in 2023. Otherwise, I mean, can you really expect us to still be getting prime Beterbiev entering the ring against Bivol at, say, 39 years old? I mean, we're already kind of pushing it at 38. But if you want to see a great Artur Beterbiev fight, check out his title unification win over Alexander Gvozdyk, the Teddy Atlas trained Alexander Gvozdyk. That was a fight where you basically had the destructive Beterbiev against boxer puncher, but more sweet science, keep you at the end of a jab and put intelligent long-range combinations together, Gvozdyk, versus Beterbiev, who was willing to walk through Gvozdyk's shots to get to Gvozdyk. So even if Gvozdyk looked like he was having some success in the early rounds, you had the feeling that he was on borrowed time, and it wasn't a matter of if, it was when he would eventually wilt and break under the pressure of Beterbiev. So that's what we're dealing with here. And Beterbiev, unlike, say, a Deontay Wilder, who is deploying a long-range missile with his right hand, with Beterbiev, he's got a two-fisted attack, and he tends to like punching in middle to short range. So he's not, I mean, neither him nor Anthony Yarde here have good reaches. Like, on paper, put it like this: Beterbiev's reach is 73 inches and Anthony Yarde's reach is 72 inches. By contrast, Terence Crawford, a welterweight, keep in mind, these guys are both light heavyweights. Terence Crawford at welterweight has a longer reach on paper than both Beterbiev and Anthony Yarde. So this is something where both guys kind of like to be in tight a little bit and then let their power punches go. And if you look at Artur Beterbiev fight over fight, I thought that he was going to lose shortly after his title unification win over Gvozdyk, because it seems like he's sustaining some sort of injury between all of his fights. Like, even after his last fight against Joe Smith Jr., he underwent a knee procedure. And I think before that, after his fight with Adam Dinas, he had a rib injury. So these different accumulated injuries, coupled with his late 30s age, I thought that he was kind of on the warning track and in danger of losing a few fights ago. But if you look at his last fight against Joe Smith Jr., where I thought that it wasn't exactly a pick'em, but I thought that this one could go either way because of Joe Smith Jr.'s youth, his power, his kind of, not quite bull in a china shop. He's not Derek Chisora, but he does tend to, as boxing analysts, online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer likes to put it, run a lot of red lights. And I thought that if Artur Beterbiev is starting to slow down, Joe Smith Jr., like Anthony Yarde, is going to be the type of opponent that's going to make you pay for that. And that's going to bring that to light very evidently. But within a minute and a half in the ring with Joe Smith Jr., it was interesting. Joe Smith Jr. started to pressure Beterbiev early. Beterbiev was showing more perimeter movement than we're used to seeing. Usually he's the one kind of pressuring and trying to, I wouldn't say pick the lock, but he's kind of patiently hunting, but less patiently than some. Like, he tends to start turning the pressure and the temperature up by like the third or fourth round. You got the feeling of that when he fought Gvozdyk, and you got that feeling when he fought Marcus Brown, another very good fighter who Beterbiev just stopped in December of 2021. Marcus Brown, for instance, I don't know that Anthony Yarde would beat Marcus Brown. So that's the caliber of fighter that Beterbiev has been fighting over the last few fights. But against Joe Smith Jr., where I'm like, ooh, I don't know how this is going to go for the late 30s, Artur Beterbiev. Well, again, Joe Smith Jr. was pressuring early, but then he started to kind of stick the jab out. At first, he was popping it and bringing it back, but then he would throw the jab out there, let it linger for just a split millisecond, and in that moment of keeping the extended jab, that lead arm extended, Artur Beterbiev just came over the top with a beautiful right hand, rocked Joe Smith Jr. I don't think he was ever the same after that punch in that fight, where he got hit and then dropped again and again. Like, the one that hurt him wasn't the one that dropped him. He got dropped shortly after getting hurt by that first right hand counter to the lazy jab, we'll call it. But yeah, Beterbiev hurt Joe Smith Jr. several times in only a couple of rounds. Dropped him like 3 times. And these were like, Joe Smith Jr. coming in and getting caught, getting countered cleanly, and then dropped to a knee, and then dropped a little bit more emphatically to the knee, and then getting knocked into the ropes. It was all bad for Joe Smith Jr. That was a demolition. And that pretty much had the boxing world saying, well, damn, so much for Joe Smith Jr. having a good chance at beating Beterbiev. In fact, I look at that as being one of the best performances of 2022. So now Beterbiev is going to be fighting Anthony Yarde, who again has a super high knockout ratio, and he's one of these guys who was kind of, capturing the public's imagination because of how he was knocking these opponents out. Think Edgar Berlanga when he went on that streak of 16 consecutive first round knockouts. Like, think of that Edgar Berlanga before these last 3 decision wins. Edgar Berlanga, by the way, just left Top Rank. That's going to be a situation to watch. Or think Deontay Wilder before he beat Bermane Stiverne in his first decision win to earn the WBC belt. Before that, Deontay Wilder had knocked all of his opponents out, but the question was, can he then couple that with enough skills to have a sustained, great heavyweight career? Well, Anthony Yarde is another one of these fighters who we see the talent and the God-given punching ability just jumping off the page. The question is, can he then couple that with enough tools to have a very good or even great boxing career? Well, his first major step up, and I mean major step up, was against Sergey the Crusher Kovalev. Granted, it was post-prime Sergey Kovalev, but that turned out to be a great fight where Anthony Yarde had Sergey Kovalev in all types of trouble, to where it looked like 1 or 2 more clean punches was going to end Sergey Kovalev's night. Well, Sergey Kovalev ended up winning kind of a battle of attrition and ended up knocking Anthony Yarde out in the 11th round. But that knockout, I kind of attribute to fatigue as much as I do, Anthony Yarde is hurt. It didn't seem like one of those just detached from your senses, drop to the canvas. It was almost more like Anthony Yarde gave everything he had to give, and he just didn't have any more energy, and he was as exhausted as he was hurt. So he hit the canvas, ended the fight in the 11th round. But Anthony Yarde did kind of open a lot of eyes where it was like, okay, so he's got some abilities, some skills behind the punching power. I mean, not that he didn't prove that before. I mean, you don't knock that many professionals out without having some skills, but it's all relative. So Sergey Kovalev was the first notable major step up that we saw for Anthony Yarde. And then he won his next couple fights, and then he fought Lyndon Arthur, who's, a very sweet science style fighter who's got an excellent jab and pretty much operates behind that. Well, this ended up being kind of a tactical split decision loss for Anthony Yarde. That's his other professional loss. It was against Lyndon Arthur in a split decision, and then he ended up rematching Lyndon Arthur 2 fights later and just destroying him in 4 rounds. It looked like it was going to shape up to be another interesting, maybe tactical battle, but Anthony Yarde started a lot faster. He put a lot more physical pressure over the much less physical Lyndon Arthur. He ended up making that physicality an issue and ended up just blasting Lyndon Arthur out of there. And he's had 1 fight since, and he won that one via 3rd round knockout, and now he's going to be fighting Artur Beterbiev. So how do I see Beterbiev versus Yarde shaping up? Well, Anthony Yarde, what I see him getting better at is the use of the jab, also kind of pacing himself. Like, exhaustion and fatigue has been a concern of mine where, Artur Beterbiev, he stopped Gvozdyk in the 10th round. He stopped Adam Dinas in the 10th round. Stopped Marcus Brown in the 9th round. Stopped Enrico Colling in the 12th round. Beterbiev, by the way, has been down against Callum Johnson, who recently retired. Joe Smith Jr. was actually supposed to fight Callum Johnson. I was looking at that one as being a very interesting matchup, but Callum Johnson was another hard hitter, but Artur Beterbiev ended up stopping Callum Johnson in the 4th round. But those other knockouts that I mentioned, those were late round knockouts. So Artur Beterbiev, he is in excellent enough shape to carry his power late and to get you out of there late. And again, turn up the intensity over the course of the middle and then late rounds. Is that going to be the case at 38? It was the case at 37, at 36, at 35. So unless he falls off of the proverbial cliff, endurance-wise, I expect him to be in the better physical shape than the much younger Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde still has to prove to me that he has 12-round endurance or even solid 10-round endurance. So the stamina component bothers me for Anthony Yarde, but also, even though he's an improving boxer, you see him in the middle of the ring, and he's kind of putting the jab out there. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to back you up into the ropes so then you don't have the backwards dimension and your movement is then limited to where he could reliably let his punches go with some assurance that he's going to land something. Now, one key here against Artur Beterbiev will be that right hand to the body. Watch the rematch of Yarde versus Arthur. He starts going with a couple intelligently selected right hands to the body, because look, if the head is moving and you don't have faith that you're going to connect with your right hand, the body doesn't move as much. Anthony Yarde started blasting Arthur to the body with the right hand, and yes, that did slow Lyndon Arthur's movement down. So that's going to be one thing to watch. I think that in the recipe of beating Artur Beterbiev, one of those key ingredients has to be the right hand and even left hook, but that right hand to the body. So then you've got Artur Beterbiev not really always sure whether the power punch from the right hand is coming up top or down low. But another thing that bothers me for Anthony Yarde is his center of the ring fighting. It's almost like he has never played in baseball center field. Center fielders, if you know, in baseball, it requires the instincts of when the ball leaves the bat and the ball jumps up into the air, you've got to know as the center fielder whether that first step or first two steps you're going to take is forward, backwards, to this side or that side. You've got to be able to judge the trajectory of that baseball as soon as it leaves the bat. So then you don't end up, thinking that it was going deep and then having to catch up and change direction and then run forward, or vice versa. Artur Beterbiev, unlike Anthony Yarde, seems to have his wherewithal in the middle of the ring to where he knows how to look at the opponent's movement and be able to throw either jabs or nice power punches with either hand. Granted, mostly, again, at mid-range, but know how to throw those punches where he doesn't necessarily need to corner you. Yes, he would rather corner like a Marcus Brown who's going to be moving around the ring, but he seems pretty comfortable fighting in the middle of the ring. Beterbiev does. Again, watch him versus Alexander Gvozdyk, who's a very good center of the ring style fighter. Anthony Yarde, not so much. He almost looks like he's using the middle of the ring to just kind of pop the jab out there, throw maybe something to the body, to try to muscle you, tie up, and maybe work you over into the ropes. So then he could feel more comfortable letting his hands go. And there's also just the musculature of Anthony Yarde, where I still worry about if the fight goes into the middle rounds, if Anthony Yarde is going to be able to let his hands go near the middle of the ring. Sometimes, watch his fight against Sergey Kovalev, he tends to just sort of freeze up, where I don't know if it's because he's experiencing muscle fatigue or because he doesn't know which punches he should be throwing right now without getting countered cleanly. But it looks like sometimes he's not as busy as you would want to be. Because, look, you can't stop and take pictures against Artur Beterbiev. He's somebody who every couple seconds of the fight is doing something to stress you out, whether he's throwing punches or not. It's either positionally or it's actually throwing punches and applying that kinetic pressure. Anthony Yarde can't afford to have long lulls where he's not really sure how to proceed with his punch selection. And no, he doesn't leave that jab out there like Joe Smith Jr. did to where Artur Beterbiev could just counter over the top. But I just think that his boxing is not fluid enough to be able to hang with the Artur Beterbiev past the first 3 or 4 rounds. Again, unless he invested heavily to Beterbiev's body and slows him down in the middle rounds, that's a big if. If he doesn't do that effectively, I see him as more or less being lunch meat for Beterbiev by like the 5th or 6th round. Anthony Yarde is going to have to make his youth, his physicality. I mean, Artur Beterbiev doesn't get off to the fastest starts. Anthony Yarde is going to have to take advantage of that without gassing himself in the first couple rounds. So again, I think that he's going to have to go to the body. He's going to have to apply intelligent pressure, but still with enough patience to where you are making Beterbiev move, you're making Beterbiev work, and you're not leaving yourself vulnerable to getting countered and hurt badly by Beterbiev. I mean, look, I know that's a lot of boxes that you've got to check, but that's just the type of skill set and set of problems that Beterbiev brings to the table. I don't think Anthony Yarde at this point is equipped to deal with it, but he does have a puncher's chance. He's got a youth chance and a puncher's chance, which is pretty much a similar chance that I gave Joe Smith Jr. But Anthony Yarde, for different reasons than Joe Smith Jr., I think is going to be finished somewhere in probably the first 6 to 7 rounds of the fight. I don't think it's going to necessarily be a second round stoppage like it was against Joe Smith Jr., but I don't see this one going past the 6th or 7th round. Not that Anthony Yarde is going to all out panic, but it's the difference in class between these two from a boxing standpoint is going to be evident, I think, by like the 2nd or 3rd round. Keep in mind, yes, Artur Beterbiev has a great knockout percentage, but this is a boxer's boxer here. Like, you look at his amateur career, you'll see him in the ring with guys like Alexander Usyk. You know what I mean? And he's beaten Usyk in the amateurs in the past. Yes, he's lost to Usyk as well, but he's beaten Usyk in the past. Artur Beterbiev was involved in a lot of those European championships, world championships, world cups of boxing. And so, yeah, don't let the power fool you. This is a sweet scientist who just happens to have detach you from your senses power. And I'm taking him via, I'm not going to take him via early round knockout. I think that the first couple of rounds are going to be pretty breathtaking. It's going to be interesting to see how Anthony Yarde goes about trying to beat up on Artur Beterbiev. Like, you've got to consider Beterbiev's 38 years of age. You've got to make that work against him. Go to the body. The guy's coming off a knee surgery. Just muscle him over. Try to out-physical him without, again, tiring yourself out. But yeah, I'm taking Artur Beterbiev via mid-round. I'm talking like 6th round, or we'll say 5th round to 7th round, TKO or knockout over Anthony Yarde. And if Yarde goes past the 7th round, then, you know, hats off to him, because I kind of see this as being feast or famine for him. And when it goes bad, I think it's going to go really bad. But even when it goes really bad, Beterbiev is still going to kind of have to be careful because of the punching power of Anthony Yarde. But then again, I would have thought the same against Joe Smith Jr., but it got to a point where Beterbiev was willing to just stand there and trade like 5 punches at a time with Joe Smith Jr. after he first got him hurt. You go rewatch that. That was an obliteration. It was mind-boggling. But yeah, I'm taking Beterbiev here. The question is, if Beterbiev gets past Anthony Yarde, are they going to be able to make Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol one of the best fights that can be made in all of boxing? This is kind of the best of the post Adonis Stevenson, Sergey Kovalev, and Andre Ward era at light heavyweight. And I'm hoping that unlike Adonis Stevenson versus Sergey Kovalev, that Beterbiev versus Bivol, or Bivol versus Beterbiev, actually happens, because we never got Adonis Stevenson versus Sergey Kovalev. It was Gvozdyk who ended up dethroning Adonis Stevenson, and obviously Andre Ward dethroned Sergey Kovalev. But yeah, let me know what you think of Beterbiev versus Yarde. Are you giving Anthony Yarde a legitimate shot in this one, or do you give him well, it's hard to really Monday morning quarterback and look retrospectively at Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr., because I'm sure that even people who thought that Beterbiev was going to beat Joe Smith Jr., they didn't think it was going to happen quite like that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Beterbiev versus Anthony Yarde, and what kind of chances are you giving Anthony Yarde in this one with his growing and still developing skill set? Let me know in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.